He's British, 75 years old, has an OBE, and he's Africa's only white chief. Here and Now meets Jimmy Moxon next tonight on BBC One.
With an estimated jackpot of £8 million, this Saturday's draw for the National Lottery begins at the earlier time of 7:45. Join Anthea Turner and Gordon Kennedy for the National Lottery Live. The show begins Saturday 7:45 on BBC One.
The birth of Formica and G-Plan remembered on BBC2 shortly as Homefront looks at the interior design of the 1950s. Here on BBC One, tackling the issues that matter, the last in the present series of Here and Now.
Tonight, we ask whether toxic waste burned in these chimneys is making life a misery for the children of Clitheroe.
My children are being used as guinea pigs.
We investigate why the government turned a blind eye and no one told the locals. Also, he spends half the year in Shropshire and half the year in a palace in Ghana, and he's still counting his wives.
I think somewhere between 6 and 8, but I've rather lost count.
He's Africa's only white chief, the extraordinary Jimmy Moxon, and the bodies in the bogland.
I wanted his body if he was dead, just to give him a Christian burial.
We meet the families of the IRA's forgotten victims who've simply disappeared without trace.
I'm wondering, am I walking over my mother's body?
Here and Now with your reporters Tom Mangold, Martine Dennis, Shonka Guha, Mark Easton, Anastasia Cook, and John Walters.
Well, tonight's programme is the last in this series of Here and Now, but we'll be back in the autumn. So from all of us, see you then.
Murderers, cowardly, skulking devils, they will be hunted down and hanged.
A battle of wills.
We are going to lose this land, and it will be your fault.
And a fight for survival.
What are we saying to the tenantry? I believe they should be made to acknowledge the power of the law.
All our money.
What can I do?
Pay what you can. That's all you can do.
God bless you.
The McGann brothers star in The Hanging Gale, Sunday at 9 on BBC One.
A star is born on BBC2 shortly in another classic episode of Steptoe and Son. Here on BBC One, Dr. Maitland is the centre of attention at the hospital ball in half an hour in cardiac arrest. And that's after the 9 o'clock news, now on BBC One with Michael Burke.
A British minister has had talks with Sinn Féin for the first time in a generation. The Republicans now want full negotiations. The government says they must get rid of some weapons first. The Health Secretary is fighting for her London hospital reforms tonight. The Commons vote is due in an hour. And the goal that puts Blackburn 45 minutes away from the championship. Good evening. Sinn Féin has held its first official talks with the British government minister for 23 years. Martin McGuinness met the junior Northern Ireland minister Michael Ancram at Stormont, shook hands and had 4 hours of what both sides described as business-like talks. Afterwards, Sinn Féin demanded to be treated in the same way as other parties in full political negotiations. The government says there must be progress on the IRA giving up its arms first. Our Ireland correspondent Dennis Murray is at Stormont.
A year ago, a meeting like this wasn't just impossible, it was unthinkable. But if old opinions here are as strong as ever, the political realities have changed beyond recognition.
Sinn Féin's landmark day began on the Falls Road. The party's delegation setting out, said its leader Martin McGuinness, with a positive approach to the talks. The Irish tricolour, though, reflecting the party's determination to end British rule in Ireland. This generation of Republicans, against the grain of their history, are no longer strangers to Stormont, with all its old unionist associations. But meeting a minister face-to-face is something that hasn't happened in more than 20 years, and never in circumstances like these.
Today sees the fall of yet another obstacle on the road to peace, and I fervently hope that it will be the last.
Minutes later, Martin McGuinness and the British Minister Michael Ancram were shaking hands, another milestone. The talks began with position papers read by those two men, and then a detailed discussion of, crucial to the government, the decommissioning of IRA weapons, and, crucial to Sinn Féin, parity of treatment with other parties. That, for Martin McGuinness, meant that a meeting between Gerry Adams and the Northern Ireland Secretary Sir Patrick Mayhew had become an imperative.
Most people would accept that it's not unreasonable now for us to want to meet with Patrick Mayhew in the course of the bilateral discussions to which he has invited the leaders of all the other parties. I mean, I expect that there should now be a meeting between the leader of my party and Patrick Mayhew.
The last time Republicans met ministers, Martin McGuinness was representing the IRA. Michael Ancram has been one of its targets for murder. He was hit by the rubble of the Grand Hotel in Brighton when the IRA bombed it 11 years ago. Perhaps a strange experience to be shaking hands with the enemy.
I shook hands with them when they came in on a formal basis as I would any delegation I meet. This was a significant meeting, but it was one step in a process, and that was how I dealt with it, and that is why I am keen to see this process continue. It is why I've offered them 3 days next week, and I hope that they will be able to take up one of those days so we can continue that process.
The government announced the end of its long-standing ban on meetings with Sinn Féin representatives like local councillors. But the price of a meeting with Sir Patrick Mayhew was spelt out in detail.
There are the three elements: an agreement in principle to a progressive decommissioning, an agreement on how it will happen, and some decommissioning to show that that intent is serious.
The government insists all parties must come to the table armed only with their mandates. Otherwise, all parties simply won't be there.
The government sees today as a sign of parity of esteem, but to Republicans it's still really second best. And that's an indicator of the deep differences between the two sides on how to reach political agreement. Michael.
Dennis, how determined is the government to maintain this distinction between exploratory talks and proper negotiations with Sinn Féin?
Well, all the signs are at the moment that the government is absolutely adamant about this. I think the government feels that Sinn Féin is moving towards being a normal party, but it isn't a normal party yet, which is why they're treating it differently. And I think the government feels very strongly that there must be signs of progress. That's their phrase. Progress must be made towards decommissioning, because you can't have one party or other parties with guns under the table, so to speak, because they're convinced otherwise that most of the other parties simply won't be there.
So what are the chances, do you think, of the IRA starting to give up its weapons, if only to move a step further in the peace process?
Well, I think it depends how serious the sides are. I mean, Sinn Féin would be in agreement with the parties representing the loyalist paramilitaries, for instance. They both feel that you surrender weapons as part of the overall agreement and not before. So it is, again, a circle that has to be squared. A seemingly insurmountable difficulty, but all the difficulties that seemed insurmountable to get us to this point have been overcome so far.
Dennis, thanks very much. MPs will vote in the next hour on the plans by the Health Secretary, Virginia Bottomley, to reorganise London's hospitals. Several Conservatives have been threatening to rebel. The former Cabinet Minister Peter Brook said tonight he'll vote against the government unless ministers change their plans for Bart's Hospital. But Mrs Bottomley told the Commons there was no going back on the plans.
Protesters were out again at Westminster today, campaigning for London hospitals, which are going as part of what the government calls a streamlining procedure and the opposition a closure programme. Health Secretary Virginia Bottomley has already suffered one Commons buffeting after trying to announce the plans initially without a statement to MPs. Today she faced another Commons roughhouse as Labour dragged her back again to exploit Tory divisions on the issue. And they hoped to provoke the humiliation of a government defeat.
The Secretary of State's the General, safely back at headquarters, ploughing on with a doomed strategy and refusing to take any notice of the fact that there's any alternative. The Secretary of State's outstanding political characteristic is that she hears only what she wants to hear.
Mrs. Bottomley accused them of playing politics and ducking decisions by calling for yet another review.
This debate is a cynical and an opportunistic piece of parliamentary gamesmanship. And once again, it shows beyond doubt that Labour will always put party politics before the nation's interests.
At stake is the future of hospitals like Edgware in North London, which will lose key services like its accident and emergency unit. But the issue is one for the NHS nationwide. Should specialist services be concentrated in larger high-tech units which have better survival rates? With sentiment running high, opponents of changes which they say are being taken too far too fast say famous names like Bart's shouldn't close until replacement GP services and community units are developed. Tonight, Bart's defender Peter Brook heightened the drama when he told his former cabinet colleague he would vote with Labour to slow down the changes and warned her of the risk she was taking.
If this House endorses the death warrant on Bart's, each and every one who votes for it is responsible. I respect